So we'll start. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to welcome you and many thanks to attend our webinar on adaptive design in clinical trials. For your information, you are more than 150 registered attendees. So you know what? We have to adapt ourselves, whatever the context, including during this particular current COVID period. That's crucial to adapt ourselves in terms of risk management, and evidently when we speak about large investments, like to conduct a clinical trial to substantiate the effect of health products. So please let me introduce my two Biofortis colleagues. As Hélène Chevalier. Hélène is a methodologist expert, and Florence Gileso, senior biostatistician, myself, business manager for Biofortis Europe. Why did we open this opportunity to present you our insight and know-how on adaptive designs? Because we know and consider a mandatory expected return of investment of clinical trials. For sure, we do not just do science for science. We do science for business and to promote markets. This is in terms of cost avoidance, to reach the best time to market, and optimizing the valorization of scientific data of functional products. Here, we would like to present you the opportunity to gain time and money, but using robust and specific models that we can manage in Biofortis. So you will have a short presentation of Biofortis, what we do, who we are. Then, what is an adaptive clinical trial design? What are the specific steps in terms of interim analysis, the type of adaptive design, and what is balance between adaptive design versus conventional challenges. A short overview of Biofortis, please. So just to remind you that Biofortis is a CRO, contract research organization, part of Mergue Institute dedicated to the substantiation of the effect of health products, providing operational and scientific services for clinical trials and analysis with a focus in terms of microbiome monitoring. For this presentation, just a reminder, thanks to note that we have a short 30 minutes time window. You could interactively use the chat tool on this webinar to submit your questions and remarks. These ones will be considered for sure with a systematic reply after this session. Please note also that this webinar will be replayed in few days or weeks. Next slide, please. What's your job in terms of clinical research? That's to demonstrate physiological effectiveness, demonstrate tolerance and safety, to test, highlight those response relationships, and to study the bioavailability of molecules with some demonstration for EFSA, for EMA, for Santé Canada, for instance, to promote food, functional ingredients, dietary supplements, food for specific medical purposes, medical devices, or drugs and cosmetics. Our job is to work in a world with 3 main locations in USA, Chicago, in France, Nantes, China, Shanghai, with our own clinical investigation units and our own centralized lab platform. Our job is just to serve innovation with more than 125 employees in the world. Finally, since 2002, we manage more than 500 projects with 250 full-service clinical trials, from study design to biostatistics, with our methodologists, with our clinical research associates, etc., in two ways: one-stop shop or plug and play. So that's time now for Hélène to start this presentation. Thanks, Hélène.
Thank you, Stefan. So now we are going to talk about what is an adaptive clinical design. So first, there is no universal definition to an adaptive design. The concept is that in traditional design, the main steps are the followings. You design, then you conduct, then you analyze. Whereas in adaptive design, the difference is that during the conduct of the trial, there are some possibilities to review the data and to adapt the design according to this related data. This clinical study design uses accumulating data to decide how to modify the aspect of the study without undermining the validity and the integrity of the trial. So even if there is no universal definition, the main concepts common to all the references that discuss about adaptive designs are the followings. First, during the design, every single modification needs to be prospectively planned into the protocol. The modification of the specified aspect of the study, the design, the hypothesis, etc., are based on analysis of data, usually through an interim analysis with full control of the type 1 error, which means the control of the risk of a false positive conclusion. And this can be done in a fully blinded procedure or an unblinded procedure.
Thank you, Hélène. So now we are going to talk about a common specific step in adaptive design, the interim analysis. The prospectively planned opportunity for changes in design or analysis is guided by examination of the data, usually accumulated data at an interim point of the trial. The data used prior to the completion of the trial can correspond to data before all patients have been recruited or data collected before the end of the follow-up plan period. You can see here an example. An interim analysis is planned after inclusion of 1/3 of patients with the flexibility for stopping the trial early due to safety. The interim analysis is led to continue to the next stage, and at the end, the final analysis is conducted with all 300 patients. To note, the trial can permit a possible sample size re-estimation at the interim analysis. According to the European Medicines Agency, EMA, a data monitoring committee, DMC, is a group of independent experts external to a study assessing the progress, safety data, and, if needed, critical efficacy endpoints of a clinical study. In order to do so, a DMC may review unblinded study information during the conduct of the study. DMCs typically include clinicians and at least one biostatistician with expertise in clinical trial and interim data analysis. Members should have no financial or intellectual conflicts of interest. Based on review of data, the DMC provides the sponsor with recommendations regarding study modification, continuation, or termination. But be careful, it is not the appropriate group to decide the study revisions because they are aware of results from within the study. In addition, it is strongly recommended to maintain interim analysis blinding from investigators, sponsors, or anyone outside DMCs to avoid introducing bias into ensuing study design, conduct, or interpretation. So now we are going to look at several types of adaptive design. Adaptive designs are applicable to both exploratory and confirmatory clinical trials. Adaptive design for exploratory clinical trials deal mainly with finding safe and effective doses or with dose response modeling. As example, at the top left, the continual reassessment method improves estimation of the maximum tolerated dose and the allocation of the correct dose compared to a conventional design. A seamless design combines two development phases traditionally carried out in separate trials in one single study. And based on the review of interim data, adaptations include trial and/or statistical procedures and can occur in different development phases. Some of these adaptations include adaptive randomization, the enrichment or subgroup design, the group sequential design, the change in endpoints or methods for data analysis, and the sample size reassessment. So today we are not going to detail all the adaptive designs. We will focus on the most common and interesting according to us: the seamless phase 2-3 trial, the enrichment or subgroup design, the group sequential design, and the sample size reassessment.
So let's talk about the first design for today. So the following design is one of the most famous, called seamless phase 2-3, but also called drop the losers or pick the winners design. This design combines into a single trial the exploratory and the confirmatory objectives traditionally addressed in separated trials, here dropping the inferior treatment groups. Indeed, if we take an example of a traditional design of 4 groups, 3 groups of different doses of products or different formulations compared to a placebo group. After the end of the phase 2, we analyze the results and we choose the best product to play in the next phase, the phase 3, with a higher number of subjects, which will confirm the efficacy of the selected product. For example, here, group B compared to placebo. In adaptive design, the advantage is that there is no stop between the 2 phases, and doses are selected or stopped during all the trial according to the results obtained in interim analysis. For example, here, during the interim analysis number 1, the group C is not judged efficient enough according to a previous efficacy threshold determined into the protocol, and the same appears for the group A during the second interim analysis, resulting in a final phase with only 2 groups, group B compared to placebo. All the patients included in the group B during the entire trial are included in the final analysis of data for the conclusion of the efficacy. So the seamless design is a popular adaptive design because it allows to take a larger number of doses for a smaller number of patients to be included and treats more patients at the selected dose because the inferior ones are stopped during the trial and it is not necessary to wait for the end of the trial to drop them. It is usually approved for important and innovative therapeutic treatment. On the other hand, it should be noted that at the end of the first stage, you may lack of statistical power, and it increases the risk to conclude to an inefficiency because of this lack of power. Indeed, the threshold needs to be prospectively planned, and it can be difficult to determine at the time of the protocol. In addition to this, the study is often powered for achieving a desired power at the end of the second stage or at the end of the study. There is also an heavy logistic requirement, and the methodological complexity is increased too. The formulation and the galenic forms tested in the trial need to be the definitive one, and this is not applicable if the primary outcome is assessed late.
Thank you. So now we will now discuss sample size adjustment with reassessment or reestimation. So usually the sample size is prospectively determined using a targeted treatment effect size, an assumption about the variability of the primary endpoint, the desired type 1 error rate, and the statistical power. Inaccurate estimate of the parameters lead to an underpowered or overpowered study, both of which have negative consequences. So sample size reassessment, called SSR, designs allow the parameter estimate to be updated during an ongoing trial and then used to adjust the sample size accordingly. The sample size re-estimation approach is to allow an increase in the initially planned study sample size if the results look promising. Sample size adjustment using blinding methods to maintain desired study power should generally be considered for most studies. They are based on nuisance parameters such as variance. Examining the data in this blinded analysis does not introduce statistical bias, and no statistical adjustments are required. In contrast, sample size adjustment based on knowledge of the unblinded treatment effect sizes at an interim stage of the study can cause an increase in the type 1 error rate, that is, a false positive conclusion. So to protect against such an increase, a statistical adjustment is necessary for the final study analysis. The main advantage of the sample size re-estimation is to ensure that adequate sample size is recruited at the end of the study to maintaining the power of a study to detect a treatment effect. This type of adaptive trial must be taken with caution because estimators of variance or of treatment effect during the first interim analysis can be hardly stable, specifically with small sample size. This could result in substantial increases in the number of subjects and the risk of incorrectly modifying a trial that was initially planned correctly. Of course, increasing sample size may be financially and logistically challenging. And finally, unblinding sample size re-estimation needs a statistical adjustment for the final study analysis to protect against the increased risk of a false positive conclusion. We will now discuss adaptive enrichment design. Enrichment of a study population refers to ensuring that participants in a trial are likely to demonstrate an effect for treatment if one exists. An adaptive enrichment design is an extension to target therapies to patients who can benefit the most for the treatment. In such design, the trial starts in the general population with the option of restricting inclusions to a subgroup or adapt the sample size following an interim analysis if the results indicate that the treatment is effective only in this subgroup. In this example, at the second stage, recruitment is limited to the subgroup of the orange biomarker positive patients. The main interest of the enrichment subgroup design is to identify a subgroup of patients that responds more favorably to the investigated intervention. And obviously, this is a major challenge in the development of targeted therapies or treatments. If the subgroups are specified in advance, this type of adaptive design does not raise any particular problems. However, we can point again the uncertainty of early interim analysis, the increases in complexity, the lack of generalizability, and the risk of lack of information for excluded groups. In addition, the second stage needs to re-estimate the sample size for the subgroup of biomarker positive patients.
So let's talk now about the group sequential design. So this kind of design allows for prematurely stopping a trial due to safety or efficacy if the treatment is very promising, or futility if the treatment is not efficient, with the options of additional types of adaptation based on results of interim analysis. So the biggest advantage is that it reduces the cost and it can reduce the time too. It can also reduce the risk for the subjects included if the product tested is not safe. However, it can be difficult to predefine the limits for the judgment of the efficacy. So let's talk now about the challenges of adaptive design versus the traditional one. If we look at the prevalence of adaptive designs, according to a review from Boswell and colleagues, including 142 adaptive clinical trial designs published between 1978 and 2014, we can see that the main adaptive design used are the seamless design, mainly combining the phase 2 and the phase 3 in light blue color in the graph. After comes the group sequential design, allowing to stop prematurely the trial for efficacy, for safety, or for futility in light yellow color. And finally, the enrichment design, also called biomarker adaptive design in the graph, in white color. And still according to this same review, the authors reported that among the 142 studies analyzed, 85% concerned tested drugs, 9% concerned vaccines, diet, or treatment delivery methods, and 6% concerned medical devices. 32% reported an independent data monitoring committee, and only 6% reporting fully blinded interim analysis. Among the 142 studies, 9% were used for FDA product approval consideration, and 12% were used for EMA product approval consideration. We can also note that adaptive designs are known and accepted by the European Food Safety Authority, the EFSA, for the health claim submission.
So now we will discuss about statistical concern. So the use of adaptive methods in clinical trials makes usual statistic practice more complicated. However, appropriate statistical methods exist to support a much greater use of adaptive designs. A major concern is the need to control the overall risk of the type 1 error, that is a false positive conclusion in case of multiple testing. This situation can occur due to one or more unblinded interim analysis, multi-arms, for example, with a seamless phase 2-3 design, or subgroups, for example, with the enrichment subgroup design. This risk must be controlled also in sample size re-estimation. And finally, statistical approaches differ according to types of adaptive design. That is why it is recommended to have a biostatistician knowledgeable about statistical methods for clinical trials and sequential analysis of trial data. So to conclude, randomized clinical trials are the standard for clinical research. However, adaptive design has become popular due to the promise of greater flexibility and efficiency. As we discussed before, they allow plan modifications based on data accumulating within a study. When adaptive designs are used properly, efficiencies can include a smaller sample size, a more efficient treatment development process, and an increased chance of correctly answering the clinical question of interest. According to the type of adaptive design, the constraints differ with the need of interim analysis with an independent DMC, the increase of product logistic and statistical concern. So the time spent for designing is to put in parallel with the potential time gained after the start of the study. And while the ethics committee can be reluctant to authorize some adaptive design, for example, the seamless design with the lack of feedback between phases, the regulators such as FDA or EMA are emphasizing the use of adaptive design because the key benefit is obviously ethical for patients in a trial.
So thank you very much, Florence, Hélène. So we hope that this information was useful for everybody and give you a positive signal to innovate, take the chance to choose adaptive design and gain time and money, limiting risk also. Some questions were submitted on our chat tool. Please be confident we will go back to you with a reply as soon as possible. Just two usual questions that we have regularly. Please, Florence, one question. Can we use an interim analysis to decrease the sample size of a study, meaning decreasing the budget for me?
Yes, so as we discussed before, there is one design, the group sequential design, where we might stop the study early with a smaller sample size than planned sample size. But otherwise, decreasing sample size is not advisable because of the chance of making a poor choice caused by the high variability of the effect size and event rate or variance estimate because it is defined early in the study. So it is why it is not recommended.
Thank you, Florence. Hélène, one question for you that we could have. What are some of the regulatory issues that need to be addressed for this type of trial?
Well, the regulators such as FDA or EMA or even EFSA know what is an adaptive design, so they are used to. And by the way, the FDA produced in 2010 a draft guidance for the industry. And at this time, the final version is still not available. So for me, if the design is built with a strong scientific support, with ethical considerations, and is technically feasible, there is no reason for the project to be rejected by the authorities.
Thank you. So that's time now. Thanks everyone. Have a nice evening. Come back to us. Do not hesitate and take care for sure. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.